Thank you very much. As you know, the United Nations and UNAMI in Baghdad acts as a facilitator in order to bring about a peaceful solution to the Camp Ashraf problem. And in the framework of this facilitation, it's important to coordinate very closely with both my American colleague, but also the European colleagues here. It's already my second time I'm here in order to meet interlocutors, in particular from European Parliament. So today we had meetings with Monsieur Vimont, Secretary General of the European External Action Service, with Mr. Vidal Quadros, Vice President of the European Parliament, and Struan Stevenson, but also Elmar Brok, the chairman, newly elected chairman of the Foreign Affairs Committee of the European Parliament. The Camp Ashraf problem entered a new step now. As you know, it was pretty close end of last year that there could have been a violent solution. The government of Iraq was determined to close down the camp by 31st of December. That was the time United Nations, UNAMI, UNHCR was asked to facilitate a peaceful solution of the Camp Ashraf problem in order to avoid a forcible solution. In the framework of this facilitation role of UNAMI, which is for us a humanitarian one, we concluded a memorandum of understanding with the government of Iraq after having consulted very closely with Camp Ashraf residents in order to find a way out. For us, of course, as United Nations, violence is unacceptable. And the two parameters of our role was, number one, we are an impartial facilitator in this whole process, and number two, we consider this problem a humanitarian problem. As impartial facilitators, we do not get involved in political discussions. However, these are 3,400 individual cases, and their physical integrity should be preserved. To this end, we negotiated then the Memorandum of Understanding, and which foresees the relocation of Camp Ashraf residents to a transit camp, a transition camp, where the UNHCR is determining the so-called refugee status determination in order to recognize Camp Ashraf residents as refugees. But the final purpose of this kind of memorandum of understanding was to have Camp Ashraf residents relocated to third countries. And because we signed the Memorandum of Understanding, the government of Iraq extended the deadline another 6 months, this was in November, until April this year. Now, the negotiations went on. The government of Iraq tried to refurbish the camp, this new camp where UNHCR was supposed to do the refugee status determination. And it was only 3 days ago that the technical assessment was ready, that the camp, but only the infrastructure and the facilities of this camp allow the relocation of residents. For us, it is very important to say that the Memorandum of Understanding is only for peaceful relocation. It does not provide any pretext for nobody to use violence. It is for peaceful relocation of Camp Ashraf residents to this new transit location. And the second point is equally important. It requires a voluntary relocation. It requires a decision to be taken by Camp Ashraf residents to relocate from Camp Ashraf to Liberty. They will not be taken out on the basis of the Memorandum of Understanding in a forcible way. Violence, as I already said, is not acceptable. Now, the technical assessment was done, and this is ready. The camp, the infrastructure, the facilities of the camp, they are in accordance with international humanitarian standards. The Memorandum of Understanding provided that the government of Iraq is responsible for providing these international humanitarian standards. This was assessed by the UNHCR, and the camp is ready to receive the first batch of Camp Ashraf residents. Now, the message, and my message, is threefold. The first one is now, the camp is ready to encourage Camp Ashraf residents to take this decision. And the message to the government of Iraq is now to sit together themselves, if requested, facilitated by us, to talk to Camp Ashraf residents, to clarify the modalities of the transport and other issues related to Camp Liberty. It is a responsibility of the government of Iraq to provide safety for Camp Ashraf residents. There were long negotiations with Camp Ashraf residents and the government of Iraq, facilitated by us, but not yet a direct negotiation. I'm very glad that the government of Iraq nominated a focal point, and this focal point will meet with Camp Ashraf residents, if requested under our facilitation, in the next few days. Some of the requests of the residents were fulfilled. Some of them are not fulfilled. This is the nature of the process, and we are in constant contact with Camp Ashraf residents in order to discuss these kind of conditions under which they move. However, once again, it's important now that the direct contact starts between Camp Ashraf residents and the government of Iraq to declare or to clarify the modalities of the transport and also the modalities of the camp management in the new camp. And my last message goes to the governments of member states, because the final purpose of the whole exercise to move people from one camp to the other, for them to undergo the refugee status determination, is to bring them abroad. And so far, the answer of member states to receive Camp Ashraf residents as refugees then, once recognized in their host countries, was not that enthusiastic. And my appeal goes also to member states, then at the end, once they are refugees, to take them into their countries and to give them a life in freedom and liberty in their countries. So these three problems we still have on the table, and these three messages to member states to resettle, to the government of Iraq now to enter into constructive talks with Camp Ashraf residents, and for Camp Ashraf residents really to consider to go to Camp Liberty. There are two alternatives: to stay in Camp Ashraf, but as the developments showed during the end of last year, this is an option which might lead to violence. And as I told before, UN opposes violence, and the Memorandum of Understanding only provides for a peaceful solution, or to move to Camp Liberty, to use the offer of the Memorandum of Understanding, to go to Camp Liberty, to do the refugee status determination process provided by UNHCR, and to move finally abroad once host countries are found. The United Nations is ready. We are providing a monitoring component for the whole process, both on the transport from Camp Ashraf to Camp Liberty, and the monitoring then at Camp Liberty on a round-the-clock basis. So there is always an access to our monitors, and United Nations provides the procedure to have them recognized as the refugees. So that's where we stand at the time being. We managed altogether, and here I do include my colleagues from the European Union and from the United States, to extend the deadline. This was one of the big problems at the end of the last year. That situation does not turn into violence, because it was a cabinet decision of the government of Iraq to close down the camp. This was avoided. Nobody was injured. Nobody was killed so far. And the Memorandum of Understanding now opens the way to get out of this camp. The deadline was extended, and to at the end of the process to have a life in freedom and liberty. Thank you very much. Over to you.
Thank you. I'd like to start by saying that the United States has worked closely and continues to work closely with the UN, and including Ambassador Kobler, We support their work, including the message you've heard today. Our purpose is humanitarian. The U.S. welcomes and supports the peaceful relocation on a temporary basis and eventual permanent resettlement of the residents of Camp Ashraf in Iraq. We welcomed the MOU signed between the Iraqi government and the UN last December 25th, which charts a way forward. Since the signing of that MOU, the Iraqi government has worked to prepare a portion of Camp Liberty, now called Camp Huria, as you've heard, to receive the first residents on a temporary basis. That work has made progress, and thanks to the efforts of the government of Iraq, the UN has now been able this week to confirm that the facilities and infrastructure there meet international humanitarian standards, and you've heard the UN's recommendations for next steps. The United States welcomes this progress, and we urge that technical discussions that Ambassador Kobler described begin promptly and lead to the first residents moving to Camp Liberty. In any move of this kind, especially given security conditions in Iraq, there may be problems. Patience, goodwill, and willingness to resolve logistical issues in a practical way will be critical. The United States, through its embassy in Baghdad and my office at the State Department, will continue to support reasonable resolution of issues that arise, cooperating with the UN and the Iraqi government, and in contact with the residents of former Camp Ashraf. Ours is not a facilitating role per se. The UN is in the lead, but we will do what we can. The residents of Camp Ashraf need to work with the UN and Iraqi officials to start this relocation process. Camp Ashraf is not a viable home. There is no secure future for the people there. The government of Iraq has committed itself to the security of the people at Camp Huria when they get there and while they're on their way there, and they know that the United States takes their commitments seriously. We note that the UN has committed itself to stationing monitors at Camp Liberty, and I will confirm that the United States will visit Camp Liberty on a regular and frequent basis. As Secretary Clinton made clear in her statement last December 25th, the U.S. takes this responsibility seriously. We're prepared to meet this responsibility. Now, to be clear, Camp Liberty is intended as a temporary transit facility to support a safe departure of former Ashraf residents from Iraq. Once there, some may decide to return to Iran, but on a voluntary basis only on that basis. Others may have citizenship or valid residency status in third countries and may be able and should be able to return to their homes promptly. Still others may qualify for refugee status under UNHCR procedures. The people at Camp Ashraf need to be considered individually, and to make determinations about any specific individual, we need to know more about them, and such information can be obtained only after they move to Camp Liberty and participate in the UNHCR status determination process. We look forward to that move, we look forward to that process, and we look forward to building on the progress made to achieve a peaceful, secure outcome for the people now at Camp Ashraf.
Thanks. The EU has been supporting Martin Kobler's efforts over the last months to find a peaceful solution to this serious humanitarian problem. Thanks to his commitment and determination, he has been able up to now to avoid a confrontation, and he has been instrumental in getting this MOU signed. Now that we know that the facilities of Camp Liberty meets international humanitarian standards, our priority should be to get the MOU implemented. On our side, we will continue to coordinate very closely with the UN and the US, because this is our common problem. And the High Representative Ashton will continue to raise this issue with our foreign minister so that our member state can continue to look at the possibility to relocate some of the residents of Camp Ashraf in EU member states. Thanks.
Thank you very much. Let me check if there are any questions. If there are no questions, I thank you very much for coming. Thank you.